You know, when I first heard about the leaks that Hasbro and DHX are working on Generation 5 of My Little Pony, it actually made me pretty sad and anxious. Not because I think the show creators are going to do a bad job of it. We've all seen their talents, and they are great at what they do. It was actually the thought of saying goodbye to these 6 wonderful ponies that we've grown to love over the last 7 years, and to the amazing world that they live in, that made me depressed and anxious. To be honest, some part of me hopes that the alleged leaks are in fact an elaborate hoax, that whoever it was that got his or her hands on the incomplete Season 8 episodes decided to fudge up the artwork and concepts and memos and is pulling an elaborate prank on the rest of the fandom. It would have to be someone who's quick to react, has some excellent artists to help them out, and is very, very clever about predicting reactions. But given the stuff that this fandom has done in the past, I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's possible to hoax up all this information. Naturally, I looked for plausible reasons to believe that all the G-5 leaked information was a hoax, but I tried to be honest with myself while I was thinking it over and looking for these reasons to believe it just isn't true. Having done a lot of thinking about this, I figured I should publish my thoughts so far on reasons why it would make sense to end G4 and start G5, and also the reasons why it wouldn't make sense. First of all, one of the ways in which it would make sense to end G4 and start G5 is the narrative. The fact is, the main 6 that we know and love have had most of their hopes and dreams come true. They've grown as characters in amazing ways. Twilight is an accomplished princess, and all the talk about how special she really is and all the implications to that effect have proven true. Rainbow Dash is a wonderbolt, and she's grown from an insensitive jerk in Season 1 into a pony who's ready to give up on her lifelong dream if she thinks it's the right thing to do. Rarity's business is growing in exactly the ways she was hoping it would. The only thing we haven't seen her do so far is design a dress for Princess Celestia. Fluttershy is coming out of her shell, and she's building the animal sanctuary she's always wanted. Pinkie Pie, well, she just wants to see every pony smile, but given everything else on this list, I expect she's seeing that more and more. That may seem like it's a small goal, but it's little things like smiles that make life worthwhile. And probably that fact is what makes the Smile, Smile, Smile song from Season 2 popular even today. Applejack, well, we don't hear much about her hopes and dreams, but at least in the chapter book, Sweet Apple Acres has become a highly important apple supplier for Canterlot Castle, which is one of the biggest things Applejack could hope for. The Cutie Mark Crusaders have found their cutie marks, so from the perspective that every story has an ending, and the fact that most main characters have gotten happy endings to their stories at this point, moving on to another narrative with other characters does make some sense. Another thing that kind of makes sense in terms of the shift from G4 to G5 is the toys. Let's face it, the My Little Pony franchise is a toy franchise, and toy franchises need to evolve over time in order to keep the kiddies interested. G1 lasted from roughly 1983 to 1991. G1.5, which is what I'm calling the My Little Ponytail series, lasted from about 1992 to 1997, so 5 years there. G2 lasted from 97 to 2003, so about 6 years. G3 plus G3.5 lasted from about 2003 to 2010, about 7 years. So considering that G4 has lasted from 2010 to 2018, it's time to start thinking about toy redesigns at the very least. From that perspective, it makes sense. There is one thing that doesn't quite add up, though. If Hasbro is letting the artists of the show design the characters, doesn't that mean those cartoon artists are the de facto toy designers too? Maybe that's okay. I think that Lauren Faust's character designs were what ended up deciding how the G4 toys would look, so maybe that makes more sense than I'd think. Now let's get into the ways in which it doesn't make sense to shift from G4 to G5. The characters. It's the characters that we know and love now that are making G4 as popular as it is. Their sheer believability tricks our hearts into thinking that they are real and tricks us into actually loving them the way we'd love a real person. A reboot essentially throws these characters out the window, and that's really risky in terms of the popularity. As I said before, the main reason why I feel depressed at the thought of G5 is because I don't want to say goodbye to these characters. Another way in which it doesn't quite make sense is the movie. The G4 series is highly popular, and the fact that a movie just came out and did well means why does it make sense now to make plans to end the series? It doesn't make sense. You'd think they'd keep it around for more than 2 years when it's this popular. Yes, it has to end somehow, but isn't 2 years too soon? Doesn't the movie call for a sequel? Another way in which it doesn't make sense is the world. While we've gotten to know the characters very, very well indeed, it feels like we're just barely starting to understand the world that they live in. What's the history between Equestria and the other nations around them, like Yak-Yakistan, the Griffin Kingdom, and Mount Eris? What nations are beyond those, and does Equestria have any kind of relationship with them? Where did the fish people and cat people and bird people that we saw in Kludgetown come from? Where do minotaurs like Iron Will come from? Where did Tyrek and Scorpan come from? We do have 2 more seasons to explore questions like these, but can it all just be done in 2 seasons? Should it just be done in 2 seasons? And finally, something which I'm going to rant about for a while is the bigger picture. This is the bigger picture within the cartoon's universe, you understand. When it comes to answering the question, why did X happen in a work of fiction, there are 2 explanations that we've come to call the Doylist explanation and the Watsonian explanation, named after the author of the Sherlock Holmes series and the sidekick from said series, respectively. The Doylist explanation is the reason why the writers did what they did from a real-world perspective. The Watsonian explanation is the in-universe cause of a given event. With that context in mind, the Doylist explanation for why there are so many threats to Equestria that are popping up that Celestia can't do a thing about is that these kinds of threats give the main 6 a chance to shine. But keep in mind, in-universe, Celestia has ruled Equestria for 1,000 years, alone. We don't know how long she's had Cadence around, but probably most of that 1,000 years she's been alone. And she's been able to handle every threat to Equestria during that millennium with few or no problems. So why is it that in the last 3 or 4 years so many threats have come up that she can't deal with? Nightmare Moon and Discord get a bye, as special weapons are needed to deal with them that Celestia didn't have access to. But the Changelings? Tyrek? Starlight Glimmer? The Vines from Everfree Forest, the Storm King most recently, she keeps getting her flank handed to her after a millennium-long track record of coming out on top. What's different? There is another interesting question that just might tie into the answer to my previous question about what's different. And that other question is, why is Twilight's cutie mark on the Tree of Harmony? The reason I think that ties in is that I think Twilight is, in a way, the reason that all these huge threats are coming up. Again, it's me bringing my real-life religious faith into this, but imagine if there's something like Satan in the My Little Pony world. Something evil, something subtle, something corruptive, something that can influence other beings who are evil, and something that wants evil to happen in the My Little Pony world. From what we've seen, other nations around Equestria, like Yak-Yakistan and the Griffin Kingdom, weren't really all that friendly with Equestria. But now that Twilight and her friends are on the scene, they're starting to get more chummy. If you think about it, Twilight's role as Princess of Friendship isn't just to help individual characters in the show be friends with each other and live in harmony, but it's also got diplomacy as a huge part of it. And her friends' personalities help immensely with diplomacy, allowing them to befriend some truly strange creatures that establish bonds that you'd never expect. In fact, one way of looking at this whole series is that those 6 ponies have established a bond with us, human viewers, through their personalities. Now take a look at what the main 6 have already accomplished in the last 7 seasons and in the movie. They've already established bonds with the Crystal Empire, the Changeling Kingdom, the Griffin Kingdom, Yak-Yakistan, and now the Stormguard and the Hippogriff Kingdom too. These guys don't live or think the way that the main 6 do, and yet they've managed to become friends with them, even redeeming 2 nations that were evil at the start. The main 6 are an immensely powerful force for good, peace, and redemption in their world, and it gets better. They are young. They've got a lot of decades ahead of them. By the time the 6 of them are old, the whole of their world will be bonded together with peace and love like something a hippie song would describe, only it could actually happen. And when you consider that friendship is magic in that world, some unbelievable wonders are going to rise from that kind of bonding. Probably things we couldn't imagine, but that we know will be good. When you stop and think about it, this force for good that the main six are actually dwarfs Celestia. Yes, Celestia is doing an excellent job of ruling Equestria apart from not enough spending on the defense budget. Yes, she's benevolent and regal and caring and motherly and a wonderful, wonderful mentor. She's another one of the reasons why I like G4 so much. But even Celestia herself hasn't managed to make this huge of progress toward world peace, at least not that we've seen. This might be the real reason why Twilight is so special. And she may just be even more special than Celestia when you think about it, as scary as that can be. But even crazier and more heartwarming than that is the fact that it's her big heart and her friendship and her friends and their personalities that make them this huge force for good. It's not having the greatest magical power or speed or physical might that makes them such a force for good, but it really is their hearts and just being who they are that makes them such an astonishing force for goodness in their world. Now, back to that whole Satan thing. Imagine being a Satan analog in this world, seeing this force of goodness, this threat against evil personified in the main six. You would not be happy at friendship spreading across the world thanks to these little ponies. You would want to destroy them, to corrupt them, or to discourage them in whatever ways you could. You'd throw everything you had at them, and if you had been holding anything back, you would stop holding it back. Maybe this is the real reason why all these ultra threats have been happening to Equestria in the last few years. Something subtle and evil has been influencing everything around Equestria to try to end this friendship before it takes over the world. Now, they've still got 2 seasons to explore all this, to answer questions like why are all these threats to Equestria popping up, and why was Twilight's cutie mark on the Tree of Harmony, and give us an explanation as to why all these things have been happening, but I'm not sure it can be done in just 2 seasons. They could definitely have more than 2 out of this if they wanted, and personally I think they should. Of course, a reboot isn't the only way they could give us toy redesigns. They could have a time skip in the cartoon that tells us things about how ponies grow so that they can change the art style going from G4 to a kind of G4.5, or even have no explanation at all for why the art style changed. As long as it's recognizably the same world and the same characters, they could still have different looks and continue the story of G4. I liked how Applejack looked in the leaked design sketches with a more realistic coloration and spots. I liked having females with furry-looking, obvious hooves, made them look more horseish. Fluttershy's hair in those leaked images was beautiful with those leaked butterfly clips woven in, and I like the idea of more male characters getting more focus. G4 has a lot going for it, but relatable male characters with good screen time is one thing G4 lacked. Even if a full reboot is the choice Hasbro and DHX are going to make, even if those toy-related and narrative-related reasons for doing the reboot outweigh the reasons to keep G4 going as is that I've cited, it's my hope that Hasbro at least allows the G4 narrative to continue in books and comics, even if not in the TV series itself. There's plenty more to explore in G4, and these characters are just a little too lovable to fully let them go. And they'd definitely be able to make a profit on those books and comics, even while they're selling redesigned G5 toys and showing us a brand new world and telling us brand new stories in a G5 cartoon. Cross your fingers, guys. I'm not 100% sure what to cross your fingers for, but cross them anyway.